And we are back again. It's Sandra Pike from Roller Page Atlantic and the Pike Group. What a great topic we had yesterday evening. And we were able to, meet a real estate agent down in Australia to talk about open bidding and private bidding. And, it really shone some light, I think, for us. So today's discussion is not going to be me leading the pack. I think I'd just like to, get your take on things and, what if it did happen? So Chandler, I'll start with you. What was your observation from last night?
I was really surprised and interested to see the actual live bidding, and I don't think we're headed there. I just don't think we're going to kind of revert back to this in-person yelling out offers. It's very cool to hear that they do that in other areas, but I don't think we're going to do that. However, the online portal system and the way she described it, it reminded me of when you're like waiting in line to get tickets to a concert. Like you have the link, you're in the waiting room. And so the fact that a buyer would express interest and then be sent to this portal link to bid, I genuinely think we're headed in that direction, and it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
Yeah. So when I got off of, the meeting with you guys last night, we talked about here in the house, because I think the biggest, thing that most agents are going to say is that the buyer doesn't have any representation. But if that house is on the market for 4 weeks before it goes to auction, you're doing your home inspection. If there's, I don't know, I'm making this up, let's say high tech, you're getting your quotes on that. You are not blindly bidding on a house. You are bidding on a house that you now are fully aware of any idiosyncrasies or whatever needs to be fixed. So, and your bank is done, your legal review, I'm assuming, would be done at that point. So, it's not good for agents, definitely. But at least the buyer knows what they're getting.
I also think. Sorry, go ahead,
Chandler. Go ahead, Chandler.
I was going to say that I think also part of the push of the transparency, though, when she mentioned that thing that all of the comparables are going to be published and that you need to sort of justify some of your pricing. If the data that's out there to buyers now in even our system as it is now is pretty phenomenal. If there was even more transparency with respect to the comps that the seller was using, you can see how some of the buyer lack of information is being actually filled by these services that can be kind of automated and collected through data sharing. So it may be some of that's mitigating this risk. That is why they don't have buyer agents down there.
I'm not sure, the buyer agents, I think, might just be a regulatory change on their end. We operated in a market like that 20 years ago where everyone represented the seller as well. And I think we've come light years ahead in consumer protection by adopting all the systems we have in place. I like the public having more information. The more information they have, the better, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not afraid of that. I like it. Interestingly, statistics show that the more information a consumer has, the more research they do into buying a home, the more likely they are to actually turn to a realtor to help them with the complexity of it. So it's I guess the key would be how it's implemented. I'm not afraid of open bidding in competition, although I do think it does need to be adapted to the market, that if the market is not hot, I'd hate to see auctions in slow markets where nobody shows up. So the as with anything, the actual implementation is key. Being a broker, I'm in a semi-unique position that I see a lot of sales, and I do get a lot of questions about house prices and what things have sold for. And interestingly, the definition of market value is, of course, what a willing buyer is prepared to pay. And more often than not, the top three offers are remarkably similar in price, which makes it the definition of market value, that they're not overpaying, that is fair market value. But every once in a while, there are wild numbers, and a lot of those wild numbers do terminate, but some of them go through. And I can see where the system would help prevent those wild numbers.
So I'm going to just put it out there. So we all know about the property that we spoke about that was, listed at 279, sold for 500, giddy up. If it were an open bidding system for that particular property, would it have gone to 500?
No.
In this market, at that point in time, maybe. We were in our winter low for inventory shortage. I think buyers were really feeling desperate, seeing nothing available through December and January and February. There was a lot of frenzy out there, and I can't say it wouldn't have happened in an open bid, although it would be unusual. I don't think I would have expected it in an open bid. Today, we're starting to enter the spring market. More listings are coming on market. Our buyers are starting to relax. They're starting to see more hope in finding something to buy. Would it happen today? Absolutely not. But at that time, maybe.
The reason I don't think so, and anything can happen, right, is, and I'm no auctioneer, right? It was interesting to hear her talk about how a really good auctioneer is really sought after. But when you go to these online, when you go to any sort of bidding situation, you do look around at the sum of the interest, right? So if there's 10 people there and all of them, tap out around 410, and it's just you and one other person bidding each other up to 500, while the other 7 or 8 people have all said thanks but no thanks, we're leaving now. I feel like somewhere in there, a buyer is more likely to catch themselves and say, this is really the two of us, and everyone else has agreed that it's not worth this. So I personally think it is less likely to happen.
The flip side to that, though, is auctions do generate excitement, and that is why a lot of people do that. And for unique items or hard to find items, you can find yourself paying more than expected. I do occasionally bid in some online auction sites, and I have fallen into that trap where I have bid more than I intended to bid. Well, just 2 weeks ago, I was looking for a salmon fishing rod, and I accidentally bought 2. So auctions can create that excitement, demand, drive. And they're both amazing deals. I'm giving one to a friend, but I could resell them both for profit. But you never quite know what's going to happen in an auction depending on who shows up.
Yeah, I think so. My personality, I know that if I was in a auction, I just want to win, and tick, I'm here. So I think it'd be of 2 mindsets. I think that, so I agree with you, Chandler, that I would, if no one else, if people only have this interest up to, I don't know, 380, do I really need to bid myself up to 500? So I see that. And then I also see what you're saying, Adam, is that, people just want to win. They're, they have, my crazy personality, right? So, I don't fear if we did have to adapt. However, I prefer that it shouldn't be shoved on Canadian sellers. They should be able to make a choice. Do they want to go private, or do they want to go public? I think that should be at their discretion and not the federal government, personally.
I totally agree. Like, well, if it's my property and I choose to sell it, I should be able to sell it however I want.
Absolutely.
And the whole challenge they've had in the past is, once that offer is submitted, it's supposed to be the private property of that seller.
Yeah. Oh, you're on mute there, Chandler.
Right there. There has to be some element of privacy for the seller, which I also, when she was saying there were those different options of, being open bidding for a while, and then it could go dark, where it's like, okay, buyers, you've all seen what we have to this point. Now we're going to turn this off, and it's up to you to do best and final. I found that really interesting as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's got to be adaptive to the market. Benjamin Tal is a top economist with CIBC, and he's predicting that for the Canadian market by year end, we're going to be back in neutral territory with price growth for the country as a whole of around 0%, give or take 5%. I think we're going to be a little insulated from that in HRM because we have this 17,000 unit shortage. We really do have a supply issue here. But if the Canadian market returns to balanced conditions, that means a lot of properties will take 3, 4, 5 months to sell before we find one buyer willing to bid on it. I think that flexibility is needed to adapt the marketing to the conditions, to the situation, to the property, to the seller's needs, and do what's best for them.
Yeah, I think it's you're right. Our market can't go on forever. I didn't realize it was 17,000 houses though in a deficit. That's something that's wild.
17,000 units, so that would include apartments as well. Yeah.
And even so, I honestly don't think that going to this format is going to fix what we have. No. I don't see this really being fixed till a few years out. Because we do have to get the supply built, right?
Yeah. It might eliminate the wild prices. But if you've got a dozen desperate buyers that have lost out at a dozen auctions, and they're desperate for a home, and they all show up on the same day and they all start bidding, it has the potential to continue to fuel rapid growth.
Yeah.
It also will take some of the blame and scapegoating off of maybe realtors. Because how many times have been like, oh, these darn realtors driving these price up. It's like, listen, we're not the one at home sitting on a laptop clicking bid, right? So maybe people will better understand our roles in it. I think people maybe think we're steering these prices higher and that we have more control over that than we actually do. At the end, a lot of these buyers are making their own independent decisions, and they're adults, and it's, once people see other individuals taking the onus upon themselves to bid up, that really kind of indicates that it's not a realtor doing it. It's them making that decision on their own.
So can I ask a really pokey question? So should real estate agents locally be allowed to discuss the market more than what we are? I know that we can log on to Valuation Halifax. I get it. I know that I would say more than 90% of the consumers here in Nova Scotia are using Viewpoint. But for us, we need written consent if we are talking about something we just sold from the buyer and the seller. So, given the market that we're in, should we be allowed to discuss the topic more?
Absolutely. I've heard arguments both ways, and some feel it's not being, when we're advertising sold price, it may not be the most tasteful thing to be doing. But the number one thing the consumers are looking for is more information. And sales prices are now public data. They are publicly released by the government. They're available on pvsc.ca. They're available on some other virtual office websites where you have to be a client to register and sign in and get the data. Literally, the only people in Nova Scotia not allowed to share sales data are realtors. Every single other person in Nova Scotia can share this information except for us. So the regulations do need to be updated to reflect the what's best for the consumer, and what's best for the consumer is access to information.
And I was going to say, it's kind of nonsense that it's out there everywhere, but heaven forbid you put it on your TikTok, right? That's how will the public ever survive if you put a sales price on your TikTok? The calamity that would ensue. Oh my gosh, right? It's silly, and a lot of these things that realtors might be, we've created and we've handcuffed ourselves and we've legislated ourselves and we've bureaucrated ourselves and paperworked ourselves to the point that we're so afraid to move in a lot of instances that it leads to more consumer frustration. To Adam's point there. So anything that we don't like where our industry is headed, we've probably done it to ourselves.
I would.
Well, maybe I can't say that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
to a certain extent.
But I feel now more than ever where this is such a tumultuous market that we need to be educating the public more. And for the record, guys, like I really appreciate you guys, coming on here today. Like there are some people who do watch this, and they are getting educated on what we're going through, what we're seeing here on the ground. And the consumer does need the information. They need the information about the open bidding. They need the information about the blind bidding, or the impact of 6.5% D-transfer tax. Like we need to be more transparent and to help the consumer understand. And we're not the bad guys here. We just we're facilitators, right? And we need to educate more.
I think there's a real, how do I word this? The industry of housing and real estate is so contentious right now. And I feel, this is my personal opinion, at the government level, they're using it as a really good talking point and a really big PR position. And frankly, we're being presented, those in the real estate industry, be it as salespersons, as landlords, as developers, as investors, are very much being painted as the problem and the antagonist. And in actuality, we can very much be part of the solution, because the people imposing these rules and coming up with these ideas, they're not out there trading real estate. We are. And the more engagement we can have and the more discussion we can have, it's a shame they don't consult us before they do a lot of these things. But we need to be mindful of the fact that some of these, some of the impression out there from government is an indirect critique of how we've operated the industry. Some of it deserving, a lot of it not deserving. So I think the more discussion and the more engagement we can have, the better.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, as an industry, we are on a trustworthy scale from the public. We are rated quite low. Although, interestingly, on an individual basis, every person, well, not every person, almost 87% of people think their realtor was wonderful for them and would use them again and really appreciated everything they did. So on an individual basis, people, I think, understand what we do. But the collective public does view us in a negative light. And yeah, it's I think it is a shame that we really are there. I don't think people realize how much we truly care about our clients. And yeah, we should be at the table having a voice in how these things roll out, because it's not just the impact on us, it's the impact on our clients.
No, 100%. Absolutely. If I can go back to the 2% property tax. So I had a lady from Ontario call me the other day. She's from Halifax. She bought her mother's home from the estate. So it got split up with brothers and sisters, right, when she bought the house. And so she's not ready to come back yet. So she has a caretaker there, takes care of the house, and he's, they're living there for free. So now she has to pay an extra 2% of her assessed value of that home above and beyond the regular property tax. And she doesn't live here. And she's from Nova Scotia, right? She's from Halifax. So to me, that doesn't make sense to me, that you're from here. And here you go. Thanks for coming out.
That whole program doesn't make sense to me. Statistically, 3.6% of Nova Scotia properties are owned by out of province owners. But when you break it down, and the government itself broke it down and provided these numbers, only 2.4% of Halifax is owned out of province. And Halifax is where the biggest housing crisis is. Now, I'm not saying there aren't other housing crises in other urban centers, but the urban centers all have very low out of province ownership. The vacation homes, the family homes, the tourism areas have the highest percentages. Shelburne has 12% out of province ownership, and Cape Breton has 14% out of province ownership. They're not facing housing shortages. This could backfire and devastate those areas while simultaneously having absolutely no impact on HRM at all. I think a 2% tax on vacant homes located in areas facing housing crises would be far more effective applied to Nova Scotians and out of province owners. If you've got a vacant home in HRM, I would absolutely support the tax on it. Taxing family homes in Cape Breton, I'm not sure that is a smart decision, and it could backfire and harm tourism and depress the markets in those areas.
You know, go ahead, Chandler.
I was just going to say, and Adam, like, look how many people online saw this rollout and was like, yes, tax them. Like, you know, this makes sense. This is good. And even though we all know in the industry, it's not addressing any problem whatsoever. In fact, it's going to backfire in a lot of ways. But there are many people out there in the public that view that action as a real positive step towards remedying the price situation. And that's just flat out not understanding anything that's going on. But it sure sounds good for some politicians running on a mandate of, well, what are we doing about housing? The other little nuance I would say in there, some of those areas, Cape Breton, the Valley, South Shore, maybe they're not experiencing a housing crisis in terms of resale stock, but they are experiencing some housing troubles with rental units. But this issue,
and affordable units.
Yeah, this does not address that in any way, shape, or form. And it's been also kind of cool to see that who have these communities reached out to be advocates to say, hey, this is a bad idea. If you're telling people from Ontario to not come spend their summer in Chester and invest in our local economy, that is a dumb idea. And who have they turned to vocalize that? It's the local realtors in large part, right? So this does reflect kind of the role that we can play. But sorry for jumping in there, Sandra.
No, that's okay. I was thinking, so one of our friends from Halifax, they own a cottage in St. Andrews. I can't imagine how, you know, he would feel if the New Brunswick government came to him and said, so thanks for being here for 10 years, but right now we're going to give you an additional 2%, 2% increase on your assessed value for taxes. Like, if the roles are reversed, we'd be all up in arms.
And it's not even 2%. It's 2% it's 2% annual. So it's essentially tripling the tax bill. If you look at PEI, they do have a 50% increased tax for non-residents. So if a resident on a given property would pay $4,000 in taxes, somebody who's not from PEI would pay $6,000. That's not so bad. What we have here, if a resident would pay $4,000 in taxes, a non-resident is going to pay $12,000 in taxes. So it's tripling the taxes. It is quite substantial.
Yeah. And forget about people from Chester. I think that's the public perception, is to, get at them because they have money. But it is the woman that I spoke to from Halifax living in Ottawa. It is the other lady who called me who said, I bought a house next to my mom, so when I come down, I can visit her, and like it's a small house, right? And some of these people who are buying to come home to be next to their family, because my parents, for example, we have a 2-bedroom bungalow in Newfoundland. So if I were to have if I had children, I can't go home and stay at mom and dad's house, right? So I'm either taking a camper or whatever. But if I could afford to have a small house by mom and dad, well, why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah. And wealthy people will find loopholes.
Yes.
I'm not 100% certain on this yet, but I believe that Nova Scotia owned companies, a Nova Scotia registered company is also exempt from all of these regulations. So anybody caught in this can simply incorporate a Nova Scotia company, transfer ownership of property to the company, and avoid it all. So a lot of wealthy people will simply exploit that loophole where exactly the family homes are the ones that are really going, the people without the money to absorb this, who are from Nova Scotia, who are part of our community, they're the ones that are going to be hurt the most by it.
Yeah.
I also feel that, and Sandra, you might want to look into this for your client there. I think there's something to the effect that if you rent it to someone from Nova Scotia, you then get exempted from it anyway. Some of the details still coming out. So, if they've got a caretaker, sign them to a $1 a month lease. This is such a silly, it's so poorly thought out, and it's almost laughable. But the other thing, and I'd be curious to get your take on this, who collects these property taxes? The municipality, right? And look how many different municipalities there are. Oh, this is the provincial share of it, right? But the transfer is supposed to be collected by the municipality, typically.
They've separated it. So now the municipality will be collecting their, say, 1.5% transfer tax, and the municipality will be collecting the $4,000 property tax. And then in addition to that, homeowners will have to pay the province a 5% transfer tax on top of the 1.5% and the $8,000 on top of their municipal tax bill. So this is going to be billed, I believe, directly by the provincial government, paid to the provincial government on top of all of the municipal fees.
So the obvious question is, who's going to confirm these things? Who's going to track these things? Who's going to ensure and monitor? Like, how much extra bureaucracy is this going to cost us to try to get what could be a negligible amount on a gross scale? It's going to be very impactful for those people who are affected, but on a gross scale, it's going to be a very small amount relative to the rollout, because it's government. It's going to be terrible to roll it out. So do we really think that this is going to? And secondly, this idea that I don't know when
you muted.
If we just give the government, sorry, I'm getting so many calls here. I don't know when we decided that if we just gave the government more tax money, they would figure everything out. It's a new idea to me. It's not how I feel personally, but we're just like, yep, just keep giving them more and more tax money and trust that they know best and we'll figure it out. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't subscribe to that.
Fun times.
I would probably have a lot more support for this program if it went directly to a fund that was used for affordable housing. So if it was a targeted tax that was directly tied to housing needs, and all of the money was accounted for in that fashion, I think I might have a different view on this. To your first comment there, I'll say this tongue in cheek, but not really. The program went into effect April 1st. Lawyers are currently responsible for enforcing legislation that does not exist yet, with no guidelines or ability to enforce it, with no idea how it applies, but they've got to retroactively enforce it on April 1st. I think probably by early to mid-June, we might actually know what it was they were supposed to have been enforcing on April 1st. And probably by August, the mechanisms might exist to actually do it. So we're kind of asking lawyers to time travel here. And they are, they're as confused as everybody else about how all of this applies.
Wow. Well, guys, it's a Friday afternoon. Enjoy your weekend. And I, honest to God, thank you. Having the wrap today was really good. Certainly a lot for us all to think about. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, and have a great weekend.